In the harsh Wyoming territory of 1873, where survival meant making impossible choices, Samuel McCready faced bankruptcy and the loss of everything he'd built. The lonely Civil War veteran turned cattle rancher stood at an employment auction, watching a young, pregnant black woman being sold by her own desperate mother to pay mounting debts. With his ranch failing and creditors closing in, Sam made a decision that would bind their fates together when he purchased her 5-year labor contract. What he thought was a business transaction to save his land became something far more dangerous when he discovered the woman carried secrets that powerful men would kill to protect. Sam McCready had bought more than help for his failing ranch. He had unknowingly declared war on the most dangerous men in the territory. The barn door exploded inward. Snow and torchlight poured through the gap like judgment itself. Samuel McCready pressed his back against the wooden stall. His rifle trembled in weathered hands. The newborn's cry cut through the howling wind. Mercy clutched her daughter closer. Blood still stained her dress from the birth hours before. Her eyes found his across the shadowed space. "McCready!" The sheriff's voice boomed over the storm. "Send out the woman and we'll pretend this never happened." Sam's finger found the trigger. The metal was cold as winter morning. "Please, Sam." Mercy's whisper barely reached him. "Don't let them take her." The torches flickered closer. Voices murmured in the darkness. Someone cocked a rifle outside. Sam had seconds to choose. Save himself, or protect the woman and child who had become his family. The wind screamed through broken boards. 6 months earlier, the same wind had carried the smell of dying cattle across Samuel McCready's failing ranch. He stood in his doorway watching buzzards circle. 3 years of drought had turned his pastures to dust. His remaining steers huddled near the dried creek bed like lost prayers. The bank notice crumpled in his fist. 3 months behind on payments. Clayton Moorhead had already made his offer. Pennies on the dollar for land that had cost Sam everything. Sam walked to his father's grave behind the house. The wooden cross leaned sideways now. Even the dead couldn't find peace on this cursed ground. "Don't know what else to do, Pa." The wind offered no answers. Town buzzed with ugly purpose when Sam rode in the next morning. Wagons lined Main Street. Men gathered outside the courthouse like vultures at a kill. The employment auction, where desperate folks sold years of their lives to pay debts they couldn't escape. Sam had sworn he'd never participate. Today desperation made liars of good intentions. Families stood on the courthouse steps. Children clung to parents who couldn't feed them. Old men offered themselves for farm work their bodies couldn't handle. Women held contracts that would separate them from everything they'd ever known. Sam's chest tightened. This was what poverty did. It turned people into commodities. "Next lot." The auctioneer's voice cut through Sam's thoughts. A young woman stepped forward, pregnant, maybe 19. Her chin held high despite the chains of circumstance. Dark skin spoke of heritage that made her situation twice as dangerous in this territory. An older woman stood beside her, mother by the resemblance. Tears streamed down weathered cheeks as she clutched a worn Bible. 5-year contract. The auctioneer read from yellowed papers. Household duties, farm work, no restrictions on location. Sam's hands clenched. No restrictions meant the buyer could take her anywhere, do anything. The law wouldn't interfere. Bidding started low. A few ranchers raised hands half-heartedly. This wasn't prime stock to them. A pregnant woman meant months of limited work. The young woman's eyes swept the crowd. For a moment they locked on someone behind Sam. Her face went pale. Fear replaced defiance. Sam turned. A well-dressed man in the back melted into the crowd. Going once. Sam's hand shot up. $50. Murmurs rippled through the gathering. The price was fair. More than fair. Sold to Samuel McCready. The older woman sobbed. The pregnant girl straightened her shoulders like she was walking to her own hanging. Sam approached the courthouse clerk. His fingers shook as he signed the papers. 5 years. He owned 5 years of another human being's life. The irony tasted like bile. He'd fought a war to end this kind of trade. Now he was participating in its legal cousin. Money changed hands. Documents transferred ownership. The girl became his property with the scratch of a pen. Her mother pressed the Bible into her daughter's hands, whispered words Sam couldn't hear. The girl nodded once, no tears, just acceptance sharp as winter frost. "What's your name?" Sam asked. "Mercy." The name suited her. Mercy in a world that offered precious little. The ride to his ranch passed in silence. Mercy sat stiff in the wagon seat. One hand rested on her swollen belly. The other gripped her mother's Bible. Sam tried conversation twice. She answered with nods or single words. By the third mile, he gave up. His ranch house squatted against the horizon like a broken promise. Paint peeled from its sides. The porch sagged under neglect. Even Sam had to admit it looked like failure made visible. "This is it." Mercy surveyed her new prison without comment. Sam showed her to the small room off the kitchen. Clean but sparse. A bed, a washstand, a window that looked toward town. "You'll have privacy." He set her single bag on the bed. "Door has a lock. From the inside." Something flickered in her expression. Surprise, maybe. Or suspicion. "I'll expect help with cooking, cleaning, whatever you can manage in your condition." She nodded. "Baby comes, we'll figure things out then." Days passed like held breath. Mercy worked without complaint. Cooked better than Sam had eaten in years. Kept the house cleaner than it had been since his wife died. But she never spoke unless spoken to. Never smiled. Never seemed to settle. Sam caught her watching the horizon sometimes, like she expected riders. Her hand would drift to her belly. Eyes would narrow against the distance. Strange horsemen had been seen on his property. Riders who disappeared when approached. Clayton's men, maybe, or someone else entirely. Sam started carrying his rifle when he checked the cattle. The truth came 3 weeks after her arrival. Sam returned from town to find his remaining steers scattered. Rustlers had hit during the day, bold as brass. He tracked the thieves toward the north pasture, found Mercy there instead. His missing cattle grazed peacefully behind her. She held his old Spencer rifle like she'd been born to it. "They came from the creek bed." Her voice was steady. 3 men. I convinced them to leave." Sam looked at the rifle, then at her. "You can shoot." "Among other things." "Where'd you learn?" Mercy met his eyes for the first time since arriving. "From my husband." The words hit Sam like winter wind. Husband. Present tense. "He's looking for me," she continued. "When he finds me, he'll kill us both." Sam felt the world shift beneath his feet. He'd bought more than a worker. He'd bought a war. What's his name? Clayton Moorhead. The richest man in the territory. The man who wanted Sam's land. The man whose riders had been watching his property. Sam's throat went dry. He'd stepped between a predator and its prey without knowing. There would be no backing down now. Mercy was still watching him, waiting for him to send her away, to protect himself. Sam shouldered his rifle. "Best get the cattle back to the barn. Storm's coming." Her eyes widened slightly. Understanding passed between them. Samuel McCready had made his choice. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. Thunder rolled across the empty sky. The kitchen table became their battlefield, not with words or anger, but with careful respect that felt more dangerous than hate. Sam poured coffee into 2 cups, set one before Mercy. She wrapped her fingers around the warmth like it might anchor her to something solid. "Tell me about Clayton." Mercy's shoulders tightened. Her free hand moved to her belly where the baby grew larger each day. "He owns half the territory. Thinks he owns the other half too." Steam rose between them. Sam waited. "I was meant to be decoration. Pretty thing on his arm at social gatherings." Her voice carried no self-pity, just facts worn smooth by repetition. "When I got pregnant, he blamed me for the shame. The baby's not his." "No." Sam studied her face in the lamplight, saw strength there that had been hammered into shape by forces that would have broken lesser people. "Whose?" Mercy set down her cup. The sound rang sharp in the quiet room. "Judge Harrison." The name hit Sam like cold water. The most respected man in 3 counties. The voice of moral authority from the territorial bench. He forced you. At a dinner party, Clayton's business partner. Mercy's fingers tightened on the cup handle. When I told Clayton, he said I must have led him on. That I was trying to destroy his reputation. Sam felt something dark and familiar rise in his chest. The same rage that had carried him through Gettysburg, through Antietam, through all the places where good men died for other men's greed. So you ran. My mother helped. She knew a way to get me papers, make it look legal. Mercy met his eyes. She didn't sell me, Sam. She saved me. The contract on Sam's desk took on new meaning. Not a transaction, an escape route carved from desperation and love. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Because most men would have sent me back for the reward money. Sam stood, walked to the window. Outside, his cattle grazed in moonlight. Such a simple thing. Animals finding peace in familiar ground. I'm not most men. I'm beginning to see that. Something shifted between them. Not spoken, not physical. Just recognition that they were no longer strangers bound by legal papers. Days flowed like slow water after that. They worked side by side without the careful distance that had marked their early weeks. Sam found himself watching her move through his house like she belonged there. Mercy's pregnancy advanced. Her movements grew careful, but never helpless. She still outshot him when coyotes threatened the cattle. Still read his father's books by lamplight when she thought he wasn't looking. You went to school, he said one evening. Before I married Clayton. My father believed education was the only wealth they couldn't steal. Smart man. Dead man. Consumption took him when I was 16. Sam understood. Death had a way of forcing people into choices they never would have made otherwise. Clayton's pressure increased like storm clouds building on the horizon. His foreman rode the property boundaries twice a week now, close enough to be seen, far enough to avoid confrontation. Sheriff Moorhead, Clayton's brother-in-law, began stopping by with transparent excuses, checking on Sam's hired help, making sure everything was above board. Each visit left Mercy paler, more watchful. He's testing us, she said after the sheriff's 3rd appearance in 2 weeks. Let him test. But Sam felt the walls closing in. Clayton owned the law in this county, owned the judge, owned everything that mattered when it came to protecting the innocent. The first real threat came on a Tuesday. Sam was mending fence when riders approached from the east. 3 of Clayton's men, armed, confident. McCready. The foreman touched his hat brim in mock courtesy. Mr. Moorhead wants to discuss your contract worker. Nothing to discuss. Maybe there is. Word is she's run off from her rightful husband. That makes her stolen property. Sam's hand found his rifle grip. Her contract's legal, filed with the territorial office. Contracts can be challenged, especially when they involve fugitive wives. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Sam felt Mercy watching from the house window. One wrong word would bring gunfire to his front yard. Tell Clayton if he has business with me, he can come himself. The foreman smiled without warmth. Oh, he will. Real soon. They rode away laughing. That night, Sam found Mercy packing her few belongings. Where do you think you're going? Away from here, before I get you killed. Sam closed the door behind him, leaned against it like he could block out the whole world. This is your home now. I'm not your wife, Sam. I'm your employee. There's a difference. Is there? The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to name. Mercy's hand stilled on her worn dress. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. He crossed the small room, stood close enough to see the flecks of gold in her dark eyes, close enough to smell the lavender soap she used. I know that this ranch was dying before you came. I know that you've made it into something worth fighting for. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I know that somewhere along the way, keeping you safe stopped being about the contract. Mercy's breath caught. Her hand moved unconsciously to her belly where his child would never grow, but where his protection had already taken root. Clayton will come for me. Let him come. He'll bring the law. Then we'll face the law. He'll bring guns. I've faced guns before. Mercy searched his face like she was memorizing it, like she expected this to be their last quiet moment. Why? Her voice broke slightly. Why risk everything for someone like me? Sam reached out, touched her cheek with calloused fingers that had learned gentleness too late in life. Because someone like you deserves everything. Thunder rolled across the valley. The first drops of rain struck the window like scattered tears. Outside, riders appeared on the ridge. Even in the growing darkness, Sam could see the glint of badge and rifle barrel. Clayton Moorhead had come calling. The wind turned vicious just as the riders disappeared into darkness. Sam barred the door with hands that had stopped shaking years ago in better wars than this one. Mercy stood by the window, her silhouette cut sharp against lamplight, one hand pressed to her swollen belly where the baby had grown restless. "How long?" Sam asked. "The pain started an hour ago." Thunder cracked overhead like God's own judgment. The storm that had been building all week finally broke with the fury of something too long held back. Sam felt the walls of his small world closing in. Outside, Clayton's men circled like wolves. Inside, new life fought to enter a world that had no mercy for the innocent. "We need to get you to town. Find a doctor." Mercy's laugh held no humor. "You think any doctor in Clayton's territory will help his runaway wife?" Another pain hit her. She gripped the windowsill until her knuckles went white, breathed through it like she'd breathed through everything else life had thrown at her. Sam had delivered calves, foals, even helped his wife once before the fever took her and their stillborn son. But this felt different, sacred and terrifying in ways that made his war experience seem simple. "Tell me what to do." The next hours blurred together like fever dreams. Wind howled around the house while Mercy labored in the small bedroom. Sam boiled water, gathered clean cloth, tried to remember everything his mother had taught him about bringing life into an unforgiving world. Between contractions, Mercy told him the rest of her story. How Judge Harrison had cornered her at Clayton's Christmas party. How his respectability had been her prison. How Clayton's rage at her pregnancy had nothing to do with morality and everything to do with social standing. He said he'd have me whipped publicly for adultery, make an example. Her voice came strained between waves of pain. "That's when I knew I had to run." Sam dampened a cloth, pressed it to her forehead. "You're safe now." "Am I?" The question hung in the air like incense, heavy with the weight of things beyond their control. The baby came with the worst of the storm, a daughter, perfect and small and utterly defenseless in a world that would judge her before she could speak her first word. Sam wrapped the child in his cleanest shirt, held her while Mercy recovered her strength. The infant's skin was pale as winter morning. Her eyes, when they opened, were the clear blue of deep water, not mixed race as everyone would expect. Fully white. Sam felt something fundamental shift in his understanding. This child couldn't be Clayton's. The timeline was wrong, the coloring impossible. "She's beautiful," he whispered. Mercy reached for her daughter with arms that trembled from exhaustion and relief. "Her name is Hope." The irony wasn't lost on Sam. Hope born in the middle of a storm with enemies at the gates. "Mercy," he said carefully. "The father, Judge Harrison." Her voice carried the weight of confession. "At Clayton's party 6 months ago, I tried to stop him." The final piece fell into place. The most respected man in the territory, the voice of moral authority, the man who would destroy anyone who threatened his reputation. "Clayton knows? He accused me of seduction, said I was trying to ruin his business partnership." Mercy's arms tightened around Hope. "That's when I knew neither of us would survive if I stayed." Sam sat heavily in the chair beside the bed. Outside, the storm was beginning to weaken, which meant their enemies would be moving soon. "They can't know about the baby's coloring. They'll figure it out eventually. Not if we're gone." Mercy looked at him with eyes that had seen too much but still held fragments of trust. "Where would we go?" "California, Oregon. Somewhere Clayton's money doesn't reach." "You'd leave your ranch, your father's land?" Sam looked around the small room, at the woman who had transformed his house into a home, at the child who would never be safe in this territory. This isn't my father's legacy anymore. You are. Hope made a small sound. Not quite a cry. More like a question posed to a world that owed her no answers. The sound of horses came through the dying wind. Hoofbeats on frozen ground. Men's voices carrying the authority of badges and righteousness. Sam moved to the window. A dozen riders approached through the pre-dawn darkness. Sheriff Moorhead in the lead, Clayton beside him. Behind them, the faces of townsmen who had never questioned where power came from or what it cost. They're here. Mercy struggled to sit up. Take her. Run. I'm not leaving you. Sam, please. She's innocent in this. He looked at the woman who had taught him that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was acting with dignity when fear was all you had left. We stay together. The riders stopped outside. Voices carried through the walls. Planning. Strategizing. Deciding the fate of three people whose only crime was wanting to build something decent in an indecent world. Sam gathered his rifle. Checked the chamber. 6 bullets against 12 men. Mathematics that had never favored the righteous. There's something else, he said. Documents I've been preparing. Legal papers that change everything. Mercy watched him with growing understanding. I've been corresponding with the territorial governor about illegal labor practices, about certain judges who abuse their authority. Sam's voice grew quiet with deadly purpose. I've kept copies of everything. Names, dates, witnesses. You've been building a case. Against all of them. If anything happens to us, those documents go to the federal authorities. Hope stirred restlessly, as if she could sense the danger gathering around her small life like storm clouds. The pounding came at the door, fists against wood, the sound of patience ending. McCready, open up. We know she's in there. Sam took Hope from Mercy's arms. The baby was so light, so trusting. She had no idea that her first breath had been drawn in the eye of a hurricane. Mercy pulled herself from the bed, stood on unsteady legs beside the man who had become her anchor in a world determined to drown her. Whatever happens, she whispered, thank you. Sam kissed her forehead, gentle as prayer. Then he walked toward the door where justice waited with the face of a mob. Behind him, Mercy gathered her strength for whatever came next. In her arms, Hope slept with the peace of the truly innocent. The storm had passed. Dawn was breaking over a world that would never be the same. Sam's rifle trembled in hands that had steadied under Confederate fire. The barn door gaped like a wound against the storm-torn night. Torchlight flickered through snow that fell like judgment. Mercy pressed Hope against her chest. The baby's warmth was the only real thing in a world gone mad with righteousness and rage. McCready, Sheriff Moorhead's voice cut through the wind. Send out the woman, and we'll call this a misunderstanding. Sam felt the weight of choice settle on his shoulders like a gravedigger's shovel. 6 months ago, he'd bought a woman's contract to save his failing ranch. Now he stood between her and a mob that wore badges like absolution. Please, Sam. Mercy's whisper barely reached him. Don't let them take her. The torches moved closer. Boots crunched on frozen ground. Men who had never questioned their own righteousness prepared to execute their version of justice. Sam lowered his rifle. I'm coming out. He set the weapon against the stall door, reached inside his coat. His fingers found the leather portfolio he'd been preparing for weeks. What are you doing? Mercy's voice carried panic now. Something I should have done months ago. Sam stepped into the doorway. Snow hit his face like scattered prayers. The mob formed a semicircle before him. 12 men with guns and certainty. Behind them, Clayton Moorhead sat his horse like a king surveying conquered territory. Where is she, McCready? Safe. That's not your choice to make. Sheriff Moorhead dismounted. His badge caught torchlight. She's a fugitive. Stolen property. Sam held up the portfolio. According to whose law? Territorial law, marriage law, God's law if you want to get biblical about it. Funny thing about law. Sam opened the portfolio. Papers rustled in the wind. "I've been studying it lately, writing letters, making inquiries." Clayton urged his horse forward. His face was pale with something that might have been fear. "What kind of inquiries?" "The kind that ask questions about judges who abuse their authority, businessmen who traffic in human flesh, sheriffs who look the other way when powerful men commit crimes." The mob shifted uneasily. Torches wavered in suddenly uncertain hands. Sam pulled out the first document. "This is a manumission paper, filed with the territorial governor's office 3 days ago. Mercy is a free woman. You can't free someone else's wife. I can free someone who was never legally married." Sam's voice grew stronger. "Hard to have a legal marriage when the bride was coerced by threats of violence." Sheriff Moorhead stepped forward. "You're talking nonsense." "Am I?" Sam pulled out another paper. "This is a sworn affidavit describing Judge Harrison's assault on Mercy at Clayton's Christmas party, witnessed by 3 servants, notarized by the territorial clerk." Clayton's horse danced sideways. "You have no proof of anything. I have copies of everything. Your business correspondence, banking records showing payments to the sheriff, documentation of the illegal labor auctions." Sam's smile held no warmth. "Amazing what people will tell you when they think you're just a failing rancher." The wind died suddenly. In the silence, Hope's cry cut through the night like accusation itself. "The baby," Clayton's voice cracked slightly. "Bring out the baby." "Why? So you can claim a child that isn't yours?" Sam reached into the barn. Mercy appeared beside him, Hope in her arms. The infant's pale skin was visible even in torchlight. "Judge Harrison's daughter," Sam announced, "born 6 months after your Christmas party. DNA that will prove paternity if anyone cares to test it." Several men in the mob exchanged glances. The mathematics of conception weren't difficult even for those who'd never finished schooling. Judge Harrison pushed through the crowd. His face was ashen. "This is blackmail. This is justice." Sam held up the final document. "A full report to the federal marshal's office. Names, dates, crimes. If anything happens to any of us, copies go to Washington within the week." The silence stretched like a held breath. Clayton finally spoke. "What do you want?" "Safe passage, for all of us, and an end to the labor auctions." "The auctions are legal." "Legal and right aren't the same thing. You taught me that." Sheriff Moorhead looked between his brother-in-law and the federal documents that could destroy them all. "This is bigger than one runaway wife." "She was never your wife," Sam said quietly. "She was your prisoner." The mob began to fracture. Men who had come for righteous justice found themselves facing something more complicated. The torches flickered lower. Conviction wavered like flame in wind. Clayton wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is." The riders departed like shadows dissolving at dawn. Only their hoofprints remained to prove they'd ever been there at all. Sam and Mercy stood in the doorway until the last torchlight disappeared. Hope slept peacefully through the collapse of the world that had threatened her before she could speak. 6 months later, spring came early to the valley. Sam's cattle grazed on grass that grew thick without the weight of drought and desperation. The ranch house had been painted. New shutters framed windows that let in light instead of keeping out hope. A larger table sat in the kitchen, more chairs around it than 2 people needed. Mercy worked in the garden she'd planted behind the house. Hope crawled between the rows of vegetables, 3 years old now, talking in complete sentences, asking questions about everything she saw. Judge Harrison had fled the territory in disgrace. Clayton faced federal charges that would keep him occupied for years. The labor auctions had ended by territorial decree. Sam found Mercy hanging laundry in the afternoon sun. Domestic peace looked good on her. Marriage had softened the sharp edges of survival without dulling the strength underneath. "Letter came today," he said. She looked up from the clothesline. "From town?" "From Washington. War Department." Mercy's hands stilled on the wet sheet. "What do they want?" Sam's voice caught. "They found him. My boy. Thomas." The sheet fluttered in the breeze like a white flag of surrender. Found him where? Confederate prison camp in Georgia. He's been there 8 years. They thought he was dead. Sam's hands shook as he held the letter. He's coming home. Mercy stared at him. Understanding flooded her face. The man who had saved her and Hope was about to become a father again to the son he'd mourned as dead. Hope tugged at her mother's skirt. "Mama, who's the man in Daddy's letter?" Mercy looked down at her daughter, at the child who had been born into war and raised in peace, at the miracle that had transformed them all. "Someone who shares your daddy's eyes." Sam knelt beside Hope, showed her the faded photograph that had come with the letter, a young man in Union blue, smiling, alive. "This is your brother Thomas. He's coming home to meet you." Hope studied the photograph with the serious attention of a child trying to understand how families grow and change and heal. "Will he like me? He'll love you." Mercy's voice was soft as evening prayer. "I guess we're going to need a bigger table." And that is all to the story, for now. Please let me know where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will create a story there. Consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel, and if you enjoy our content, click this video on your screen. I promise you, it's worth watching. See you tomorrow.